Well, that's a pretty painting. Nice color choices, energetic brushwork, dynamic presence, smooth lighting, fulfilling composition, delves a little into my vulnerable side. An all-around nice viewing experience. You might say it's quite beautiful. But what does beautiful mean? Like, it has some spirit to it, some charm. It's not just sitting there, it's engaging you. Engaging me? There's like a meaning to it or something, I don't know. It has a presence, you might say. The point is, something inside of you is different because you looked at this. Something moved. Something is illuminated. The phenomenon of life feels slightly different now. Now there is something else that moves. A different set of values that illuminates something different in me. And life becomes a different phenomenon once again. Now a different value system once more, and something in me changes again, culminating in yet another adjustment to the phenomenon of life. What is that little thing that moves when I look inside of someone else's imagination? What is it that lights up? How do we study it? Is it worth attempting an answer to that ever-elusive question, what are people after all? As time goes on, are we getting closer, or are we getting further away? And are the people of the past so far behind us as we think? Take a visit to the monastery and listen to a lecture from Sandro Sebastian, the art monk. When we speculate the practice of art, and the exercise of looking at it for interpretation, the activity of making itself seems to be an attempt at discovering just what we're doing when making art and performing the exercise of looking at it for interpretation. That's why you're making art, aren't you? You'll never reach a conclusion, of course. I'm just presenting another way down the road we might not have yet considered. It deepens the mystery, doesn't solve it. Its opposite is a scientific principle. Science has definite rules, equations, formulas, and conclusions. When rain falls and collects, to evaporate later under a hot sun, condense itself in clouds overhead and return to Earth, we've discovered how the phenomenon of rain works. It starts with a mystery and ends with an answer. Once at the end, we've reached the scientific conclusion. The magic is over. We're seeing the conclusion. The mystery is solved. And we can all walk away. What art is keeping all of us spectators inside of that middle portion, where water is found in puddles and mysteriously vanishes on a sunny day, but before the scientific conclusion is reached. A masterful work of art is known for keeping us in that mysterious, magical middle portion of our journey forever. We never reach the end, and continually focus, stay compelled, because the mysterious middle section is where anything is possible. That moment after the puddle is dry, and we haven't yet discovered where it's gone, the water could be anywhere. Then in that moment, when we're attempting guesses to figure out where it's gone to, that is when all our most beautiful, raw, creative sides are exposed. You get to believe in any sort of magic you want. Who could say no to that? Let's look at another abstract reasoning exercise. If you take another look at a science, you can never really know just how complete the science is. We might have discovered the entirety of how a natural phenomenon occurs, like gravity, rainfall, the properties of fire, or our own biology. We might know everything there is to know, but we might not. There may yet be undiscovered principles that would change everything. There was an ancient time when people could create fire, sure, but no one knew why fire burned the way it did. Even if we know that lots of heat to a flammable object will make it catch fire, the idea of molecules of oxygen combusting, what fire is on a molecular level, wasn't discovered yet in, say, the Middle Ages. But that doesn't mean the science wasn't happening. We just hadn't figured out what was causing it yet. And if I might bend your mind a bit more, at our present day, who's to say we still know everything about why fire burns? There could be more to it we just haven't discovered yet, or are presently taking for granted. Another, more abstract philosophical example is you holding out a stone and dropping it. You see it fall, and chalk it up to gravity, but technically, you can't prove that there isn't some other science happening here we haven't discovered yet. I can't prove there is, but you can't prove there isn't. If you're rolling your eyes right now, I don't entirely blame you, but I'm just trying to warm up the part of the brain we're going to be using for the duration of this program. Let's talk about your 5 senses. You only know that you have a sense of sight because someone told you you had one. If no one had ever told you were seeing, you never would have thought so. You would think that all this just is. I don't do seeing. I don't know what seeing is. There's a man in front of me on screen and it just is. What do you mean seeing? And no, I'm not hearing him talk. His lips are moving and I'm getting the information, but it just is. Some auditory channel in the air that's vibrating molecules against my eardrum. Don't be silly. He's talking and it just is. There's no hearing happening. You're making that up. But before you laugh at this ignorant person, what if you indeed have other senses that no one ever told you have? All this time you thought, this isn't a sense, it just is. And you've walked around all these years interacting with people, engaging with life, completely taking these senses for granted. Imagine how silly you must have looked to someone who knew better as they were observing you. Or how that better knowing person would feel having to tolerate having a conversation with you. Don't worry, I'm not judging you, but it's good that you're here. When you are taking something for granted, you don't know that you are taking it for granted. That's why they call it taking it for granted. Sandro Sebastian. The problem with traditional science is 2 main flaws. It strictly examines the universe with only the 5 agreed upon senses that we are all told we have. Nothing can be considered science until it can be either seen, smelled, tasted, touched, or heard. And the second flaw, it assumes that the only sciences at work are the ones we've already discovered. It does not account for any undiscovered sciences. As a result, science can't answer the question of why certain people are more superficial than others, or where does general ignorance come from, or when someone does something bad to me, what do I do about it? It doesn't answer the questions that matter the most to me. Now, I think the question, what makes it art, is better phrased as, why does art matter? The questions are interlinked. The latter hangs on to the former, pulling it into a more specific realm and narrowing down the responses. A viewer has to now decide what's important here. If you don't want to be bothered having to decide what's important here, if you just want to wait for it to tell you what to think, to reach out and give you some sort of adorable little tickle, announce to you in direct terms what it is trying to say, so that you don't have to focus, concentrate, know who you are a little bit, or make up your own mind with a level of self-assuredness, if you don't want to have to do any of that, then you can go watch television, I guess, or stream something online, or listen to the pop music on the drive to and from work. The people producing such content are more than happy to tell you what to think, and when to purchase their new products. But if you're ready to concentrate, to exercise judgment and make use of your life experience, the self-assuredness you've earned by living through things, meeting people, dealing with life challenges and coming out sharper, if you want all that put to use, then here comes your chance. Does this guy know something I don't know? Or does he overestimate himself? I've been on both sides of the argument myself. Tackling the question of why does art matter is a matter of trying to crack the mystery of what people are, not physically, biologically, but emotionally. Where do our impulses come from? Our insecurities, our desires, our ego, our identity, all the non-physical components and sense of purpose, dignity, self-esteem, and overall sense of propriety. what we are on a philosophical level, in the abstract sense. Is there a poetic reason that the universe needs a unique species of organisms that experiences existence on that sensitive, thoughtful, vulnerable level that I just described? But I'll not overload you just yet. For now, let's talk about how you see yourself inside your head. You're aware that there were many centuries before you, and people that lived in the world before you, in your country and out. You speak a language that was invented before you were born, one that was invented by a someone you'll never meet. Yet from the moment you began learning to speak, you were already adopting that someone's personality traits. It rubs off on you. Have you ever imagined what the human identity was back at the beginning? In the Garden of Eden, or shortly thereafter? Or even if you prefer the more secular approach, that we evolved from something else, there had to have been a point where we were aware we were human. Yet there was absolutely no history, no one before you, no wars had been fought, no cultural revolutions, no nations, empires, kings, queens, aristocrats, presidents, or politicians. A time when there was no such thing as grandparents, no such thing as ancestors. Can you imagine that? What daily life was like at that moment in the development of the human personality? Of course not. You can't imagine an existence where there's simply no history. What language do you even speak? What's your people's history, your identity? Try as you might, you can't imagine that. The moment before anything happened, all of us alive today have only ever lived in a world where everything that has happened so far has already happened. We are literally the people furthest away from a world where nothing has yet happened. Therefore, we are the people least suited to answer the question of what the world must have been like at humanity's beginning. Frustrating. Everything we live inside of now, governments, militaries, school systems, economies, job markets, housing complexes, distribution of resources, law enforcement, and all that, had to be dreamed up by people who are making decisions about what's important here. Does that question sound familiar? One country has capitalism, another has socialism, one has a president, another a prime minister, all civilizations making these decisions based on what's important to them, what our values are, which can only be determined based on what you believe people are. What are people? What are our needs? How ought we conduct ourselves? How do we see ourselves inside of our heads? Is it a scientific question that can be answered with molecules in a petri dish? Or with numbers and chemicals in a lab? Is it mathematical? How do we determine what our general level of self-esteem is and preserve it so we can maintain civilized behavior? Forgive me if I feel a bit sentimental in saying this, but there is a blessing from God of having an ability to communicate to another person through our shared self-esteem, discussing how we see ourselves in our heads and what makes us vulnerable. When you discover that one human imagination can broadcast to another, it opens up any and all possibilities and changes the rules. And this is the only realm of humanity where all of us are truly equal, whether we like it or not. When people say that art is subjective, I think what we mean more is that people are subjective. I can present a painting of what I believe is important, and as we sit around and discuss it, we can do two things. Mention Sandro Sebastian's aesthetic choices, Sandro Sebastian's personal values on what makes colors speak, what makes lighting dynamic, what makes a forceful composition, and what this artist believes makes a piece charming, seductive, compelling, and not a piece of furniture or household appliance. That is the first phase of the discussion, where we are looking into another person's imagination and deciding as best we can what his or her values are, so we can hopefully expand our own thinking. Sandro may have thought of something I haven't thought of. The second phase of this discussion, if we are interested, would be whether or not we agree with his values. He might like a full rainbow of colors on his canvas, but I might find it overindulgent. He might like the way he renders human figures as half-realistic portrait, part marionette doll, but I find that contrived or juvenile. He might find his lighting schemes dynamic and forceful, but I might find it superficial and obvious. What this artist believes is important here, and how well it's communicated, is not the same as whether or not I agree with what he believes is important here. We're just trying to discover as many new ways of thinking that we can, not looking to reinforce my own way of thinking. If that's all you want to do, is look for your own painting inside of other people's works, then why bother looking at anyone's works but your own? If you want to do that, then there's a nice job on the university art department faculty for you. There's something about the way you look at the world and what you believe is important here that we can't always put into words. And above all, how much are you willing to take for granted about all this? All of this affects how you see yourself inside your head, and ultimately what you believe people are, and how you will treat the people around you and treat yourself. It determines your behavior. There is no scientific, evolutionary, biological explanation for human behavior. Sweets is about the heroic exploits of Jacob, a young preteen boy born with a bizarre medical condition in where candy, sugar, and junk food make him stronger while all vegetables and fruits make him sick. He receives superhuman ability one day when visiting a candy factory on a class field trip. He plummets accidentally into a vat of chocolate, and when it floods his system, he awakens with super strength. The town soon hears stories of a masked vigilante patrolling the night, performing feats of superhuman ability, stopping both criminals and adults hurting kids. The local media takes notice, and journalists are scrambling for eyewitnesses.
I get multiple stories and eyewitness testimonies all talking about this same kid, but don't ever get the same description twice. Though the stories are sharp and with much detail, I'm beginning to feel the sources becoming less reliable. After spending some months investigating and interviewing, gathering notes from my boss, the editor, the tales of the town's new superpowered justice giver aren't becoming any more cohesive. If I could take time and separate fact from fiction here, the sightings of a preteen boy acting out his juvenile fantasy by beating up bad guys and evading police, there might be some chance of crafting a realistic image in readers' minds of what this is about. "You're a journalist. Investigative journalism provides facts," I hear him saying already. "I'm not publishing this until you've got reliable sources. Let's not forget there's still a chance this is just a hoax," says the old man in the chair. I suppose it's never wise for a newspaper editor to take a chance on such a bizarre, unfounded story. But every event breaking into the news spawns 1,000 more rumors and testimonies. Each account I record just deepens the mystery. I've noticed the more enthusiastic descriptions come from kids. They've got more faith he's real and a hero. Their parents don't seem convinced, or say it's just a movie studio doing some gimmicky advertising, attempting to build hype with false news stories online. They are that shameless. Hearing and recording each kid's interview, though, with details about how the mysterious hero was spotted. At the grocery store my mom goes to, or goes to my school, he's in my history class, and see the listening parents grin and tell the kid to settle down and not lie to the nice man. It's been inspiring to be reminded of childhood imagination, enthusiasm, and innocence. But one adult, standing alongside their kid, said he might have seen it, just that he wasn't sure. It was evening, and in the lamplight mixed with moonlight, maybe a weird shadow was cast and he saw the little hero jump across the street from rooftops. I stayed keen with interest on these stories until it began circulating that the kid wasn't human at all, perhaps some alien, extraterrestrial, or alternate dimension being that traveled here to defend us. It became then harder to find the point of focus when kids gave mixed descriptions of his abilities. Super strength, speed, and endurance were common, but other kids threw in more improvised solutions like flying, becoming invisible, or ability to shrink and grow. A boy that a colleague spoke to even claimed he saw the mysterious hero become tall as a giraffe. When arguments on the internet raged out of control, the kids debating it openly during school time, some education board members even outlawed the discussing of him during school hours altogether. Leaving a subway train stop one night, piecing it all together and hoping the kids' stories would connect, I began entertaining the notion that the imagination of the child, no matter its purity, innocence, and enthusiasm, was in this case mistaken. I exited the underground, the late afternoon sky between buildings dark and red, when, in my corner view, a blurry, stout object thumped tremendously, full speed, down on the ground on the front side of an apartment building. Like some tremendous cat-type creature, it fell from what seemed like the top floor and landing hard, like a tenant threw something out of their front room window. Whatever this creature was, it regained itself remarkably quick, checked around, and abruptly shot over to an alley a block over. Whipping away, and in the light of sunset, I saw a gray hoodie he wore, remembering eyewitnesses describing the same apparel choice, and stashed beneath his arm, I saw some little box, like the kind you get for pastries at a bakery. I jettisoned myself over to that narrow alley he darted into, but only arrived at emptiness. I scouted the length of it, poking my head out of the other side and doubling back. The alley was empty, but near a garbage bin, I spied that baker's box, but with lid open and totally empty, crumbs fresh inside. I then looked up instinctively and caught a silhouette looking down from the building's ledge. The hooded, masked person then fled. It may just be that I'll have to take another look at those eyewitness accounts.